We all think of surgery as pretty routine, right? You go to sleep, you wake up, and the problem's fixed. But what if a tiny hidden detail in your own DNA could turn that simple procedure into a life-or-death tightrope walk? Let's get into it. So, our story kicks off with something incredibly familiar. A 12-year-old boy is scheduled to get his tonsils out. You know, a tonsillectomy. It's one of the most common surgeries out there for kids. But for this patient, this totally everyday procedure was anything but. Because deep down in his genetic code, he was carrying a rare condition. And what that meant was that the standard drugs, the very tools an anesthesiologist uses to keep a patient safe and comfortable, well, in his case, they could trigger an absolutely catastrophic chain reaction. This hidden danger, it's got a name, hyperkalemic periodic paralysis, or HIPP for short. It's a rare neuromuscular disorder, and it completely rewrites the rulebook for the operating room. Okay, so what exactly is HIPP, and why does it make anesthesia such a high-stakes challenge? Let's break it down. At its core, HIPP is a genetic condition, what's known as a channelopathy if you want the technical term. It affects these tiny little sodium channels, basically doorways, in our muscle cells. For someone with HIPP, even a small spike in the potassium level in their blood can cause these channels to go haywire, leading to these sudden, scary episodes of muscle weakness or even paralysis. And what's so wild about this is how completely ordinary the triggers are. We're talking about things like eating a banana, getting a little chilly, or just feeling stressed out. Any of those can set off an attack. And that last one on the list, certain medications, well, that's the one that turns the operating room into a minefield. So, knowing this, the medical team couldn't just walk in and start the surgery. No way. They had to put together this incredibly meticulous battle plan to get through the gauntlet ahead. And it all started with a really solid pre-operative strategy. The team basically built their plan on 4 key pillars. First, education. They got the family on board, explaining exactly what foods to avoid to keep his potassium down. Second, stress management. Since stress is a trigger, they gave him a calming medication called midazolam to ease his anxiety. Third, temperature. They actively warmed him and the OR itself to make sure the cold couldn't be a trigger. And finally, one last check. A blood test right before starting, just to be sure everything was stable. And check this out. It worked perfectly. The boy's potassium level came back at 4.2, which is right in that perfect, normal, stable range. The pre-op plan was a total success. Stage 1 was complete. Now, on to the main event. All right, so let's move into the surgery itself. This is where the anesthesiologist's expertise becomes just absolutely critical. They were, in a very real sense, navigating a field of invisible tripwires to keep this kid safe. And in this minefield, there was one paramount, unbreakable rule. The one drug they absolutely, positively, under no circumstances could use: succinylcholine. So why is this one drug so dangerous here? Well, it all comes down to how it works. Succinylcholine is a standard muscle relaxant, but it works by causing muscle cells to release a big flood of potassium. For most people, it's no big deal, but for a patient with HIPP, it's like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. It is the perfect trigger for a massive, life-threatening attack. So instead, the team chose rocuronium. It's a different type of relaxant that does the same job but has zero effect on potassium levels. A simple choice maybe, but it's a choice that makes all the difference in the world. This critical drug choice was just one part of a bigger 3-part safety protocol inside the OR. First, stick to a cocktail of proven safe drugs like propofol and fentanyl alongside that rocuronium. Second, even the IV fluids had to be potassium-free, so they used normal saline instead of the very common Ringer's lactate. And third, they monitored the patient, relentlessly. And what does relentless monitoring actually look like? Well, we're talking a continuous EKG, watching his heart's rhythm for the tiniest change that could signal a potassium spike. They used a special neuromuscular monitor to track the exact level of muscle relaxation. And get this, they were taking blood samples to check his potassium levels every 30 minutes through the whole surgery. There was absolutely no room for guesswork. Because of this incredible, meticulous plan, the surgery went off without a hitch. But the danger wasn't over. Waking the patient up and managing that immediate recovery period required just as much vigilance. So in those first 24 hours, The team was on a strict timeline. They only removed the breathing tube after confirming his muscle function was fully back online. He was moved to a high monitoring unit like the ICU, not a standard recovery room. They continued with intermittent EKG and potassium checks, and they managed his pain really carefully with medications that wouldn't introduce any new risks.
You know, this entire case is such a powerful window into the real world of anesthesiology. It reveals a depth and a complexity that I think many of us just never get to see.
A summary from the actual case report just says it all. Success wasn't an accident. It was the direct result of having a deep understanding of this rare disease and then meticulously applying a specialized plan step by step. It just really highlights how vital this role truly is. And that's really the ultimate takeaway here. Anesthesiology isn't just about putting patients to sleep. It is a discipline of hyper-personalized medicine, where this deep knowledge of pharmacology, of physiology, and of a patient's unique genetic makeup all come together to navigate these incredible risks. And that really leaves us with the final thought. This was just one patient with one rare condition. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other invisible gauntlets like this does modern medicine quietly and successfully navigate for all of us every single day?